Today I'm talking to Angela Walker. Angela is a nutritional therapist offering both personalized nutrition and advice and functional medicine. She holds a Master of Science in Nutritional Medicine combined with a strong background in applied nutritional therapy. She works with health clinics with an emphasis on brain performance and nutrition. She's leading the nutrition segment of our stress relief program. I've invited her today to understand how stress and nutrition are connected. Hello, Angela. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Hi, Melina. Very happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So today we are going to explore the link between our stress levels and our eating behaviors and how the two connect each other. So my very first question is pretty broad, but I'm trying to understand what's the link between the two and if there's a connection between the two. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's a great question. The way I would answer that is to start with thinking about stress or putting stress into the real context, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding out there with people about what stress is. And stress is absolutely integral to how our body works. In fact, none of us would be here if we didn't have a stress response system. It really is the thing that allows us to interact, to engage successfully with our environment. And how I usually talk about stress and the stress response system to my clients is to think of it as the internal logistics system of your body. And its job is to direct resources to exactly where we need them. So if we think of, and this is the example that's always used for stress, we look back and we think about our ancestors, prehistoric man. So there they were, happily enjoying their day, and then they see the saber-toothed tiger on the horizon in the savannah.
Mm-hmm.
And the saber-toothed tiger is coming towards them. He spotted them. He thinks, hey, that's my dinner. What do? There's a recognition that there's a big scary thing. And so your stress response system kicks in and it's fight or flight. What am I going to do? Am I going to run away from it, or am I going to stand my ground and fight it? And what your stress response system does is creates the right resource to allow you to do that. It creates a release of energy. It stimulates blood circulation around your cardiovascular system. So it gives you the resources to deal with that thing. And it's important to understand that so that we can have a bit more awareness and therefore a better understanding of how to manage it. The goal isn't to stop stress, but to really try and learn how to manage it rather than let it take over us. And let's face it, our environments have changed beyond all recognition versus our environments in prehistoric times when the stress response system was being kind of created. So the link comes in that the things that we eat and drink can either have a positive or a negative response on how our body manages stress. So we can eat in a certain way that's going to make stress be more reactive. Equally, we can eat in a certain way, we can eat foods that are going to repair the damage and give us the better resources so that we manage stress in a much more natural, us in control kind of way. Does that sort of help? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. It does have an impact, a direct impact, actually.
A direct impact, but an integrated impact. It can be positive, it can be negative, it can help us manage how the body responds, it can give us the resources so that, if you like, what good nutrition can do is give you the resources so that you can fine-tune how your body responds to stress and not overreact to stress. Because this is what happens in the modern day life. We just have stressors constantly impacting us all the time.
Yeah.
And our stress response system was designed to have a stressor, deal with it, and then rest. But that's not what happens any longer. We're constantly assaulted by different events, be it the train not running because there's snow on the line, be it somebody running late, be it the plane being cancelled, be it not enough sleep. There's constantly something happening that triggers us, that we respond to as a stressor. And that's where the challenge comes. And we need a lot of resource to be able to manage that. And that's where the nutrition comes in.
Okay, I see. So it seems like we eat with our brain, and we tend to overeat or eat more junk food or rich foods when we're stressed. Why is that?
Well, actually, if I look at all the clients I've worked with, and again, if I look at the literature and the way we're kind of taught about nutrition, there are typically two responses to stress.
Okay.
Some people overeat, exactly as you've described. So they might be overeating junk food, they might be overeating sugary food, fatty food. Salty food is often one that people who are highly stressed will crave.
Okay.
But then there's another group of people, and maybe this is a smaller group, but there's definitely a significant group of people for whom when they're stressed, they just don't eat.
Okay.
This is all about this kind of rich individuality that we all have.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I'm always trying to do when I work with people is teach them to listen to their body, to understand more about how their body works, which might be different to how my body works and different to how your body works.
Yeah.
But too often we're really on autopilot. We're just doing things without thinking of the consequences or thinking about how it's impacting on our bodies. But if we learn to listen to our bodies, we can easily interpret the signals that it gives us. And it's a really cool one to figure out. So, for example, if you're the person who craves food when you're stressed, then you can start to use that as a trigger, as a signal. Hey, things are getting a bit out of control for me. I need to take steps to manage my stress.
Yeah.
Go for a walk, do a breathing exercise, have a bath with Epsom salts, whatever it might be. So how I really like to think of this, use these as signals that tell you my body's getting stressed, because we don't always recognize stress as stress, if you sort of see what I mean. We need to kind of pick out those signals and learn to read them.
Yeah, definitely. It's very difficult to know when you're stressed. But the more you do that exercise about noticing, what the signs of it, then
Yes.
then you become more aware and you can tackle it more easily.
Exactly. In fact, I had a call with a client this morning. Now, she had a really interesting signal that her body gave her. It actually, in this case, it wasn't to do with stress, but I still think it makes the point nicely. When she gets tired, she feels hungry, but she's learned that it's not that she's hungry, it's that she's tired. It's just the language it's almost like her body has got a strange dialect or a strange language that it's using.
Yeah.
But she's learned that hunger doesn't necessarily mean I need to eat more. Hunger means I'm tired. Maybe I need to sleep more. I need to go for a walk. I need to change tasks. So it's kind of cool when we get this, and it just takes a bit of time and maybe a bit of thinking and, help working with somebody to figure this out.
Yeah, definitely. That makes me think of when you have dinner, it's 7 o'clock, and then 3-4 hours later, you start being hungry and you think you need to eat again, but actually you need to go to bed because you're tired.
Yeah, exactly.
Another thing is, I remember after a breakup, I lost so much weight, and I don't think I was eating less, and I dropped a size. So, can you tell us how stress can cause weight gain, or maybe we lose weight when we even, eat normally?
Yeah. No, again, that's a really good question, and it can be part of helping us understand a little bit more about what is really going on in the body. It's mainly down to cortisol. So if we think about cortisol, is the hormone that is produced by the adrenal glands, and its role, if we go back to the first question, its role is to direct those resources in the body. It prepares the body for a big challenge. And when we've had enough cortisol, the message is sent to the brain saying, hey, switch off, you've done enough.
Okay.
The problem is when these stresses are just kind of constantly bombarding us, the cortisol never switches off. We don't have the recovery time, the switch off time. And then the cortisol switch off, it doesn't happen, and it gets a bit sluggish. You know, it sort of forgets how to work. It just isn't as sensitive as it used to be. Now, for a while, this is okay because, you know, we've got adrenaline running around in the body, we've got cortisol in the body. We keep going, we feel okay, but they're like loan sharks. You know, they're giving you something, but it's not a sustainable way to live. They're eventually going to come back and take you into debt. We also end up with very elevated cortisol levels, and this causes blood glucose to be released from storage forms in the body. So it puts in a lot of glucose into circulation, regardless of whether you've eaten. And this means there's less. The body doesn't go into the fat burning mode. It's just easily got this glucose available to burn as fuel. But often we're not doing so much activity. And so that glucose has been released, but it's kind of got nowhere to go. It's not going to get used up. So the body puts it back into storage, but in an easy access storage, which is fat around the middle. And sometimes you also see these sort of fatty areas at the top of somebody's back, sort of between just below the neck. That kind of fat around the middle is often a pattern that we see when people have been, you know, sustained stress for a long while.
Yeah.
It doesn't look particularly good, doesn't make us feel particularly good about ourselves. But more importantly, if we put the aesthetics to one side, it's actually quite dangerous, because it surrounds our vital organs and it can lead to kind of chronic disease. It can lead to fatty liver problems, cardiovascular disease, all these kind of things. So that's a sort of a quick whiz through the biochemistry of why we store fat and why we can put on weight when we're under a lot of stress. Equally, different people function in different ways. Our biochemistry is always very individual. So there's going to be another group of people for whom, when they've got a lot of cortisol, they've got a lot of adrenaline running through their body, it sort of ramps up their metabolic rate, and they're the people who would be more likely to lose weight. The key is always to kind of understand yourself and understand what's happening to you so that you can read your signals. That definitely the fat around the middle is the more common response, but it's not the only response.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, how our bodies work. It's fascinating.
We're always learning more about how the body works. We're always learning more in terms of the biochemistry. Now we're understanding more and more about the microbiome in the body, how that works, how that interrelates. And then there's also how it relates to each of us individually. So it is kind of a never-ending curiosity journey that keeps people like me entertained.
On the contrary, are there any foods that can cause stress? So the foods having an impact on our stress rather than, you know, stress having an impact on our food. So we know how these two are linked, but is there any foods that we should be maybe avoiding or eating less? Or you talked about salt earlier, for example.
Yeah. So salt is very interesting when it comes to stress. Salt is sodium chloride. So basically a composition of salt. And sodium is processed through or your adrenal glands, which control the stress response system, also control the salt balance in the body. Okay. So it's that kind of connection that makes us crave salty foods, that's a sign of the adrenal glands being overworked. Let's call it that. It's not that salty food per se is going to cause stress. If we're looking at what foods can cause stress, it's really those very highly refined carbohydrates, those high sugar snacks, the junk food that has a lot of refined sugar in it. Those are the things that will really, really play havoc with our stress response system. And the reason is this: if we eat those refined sugary foods, our blood sugar levels, so the amount of sugar, glucose running around in the body, it's like it's on a huge roller coaster. So 1 minute it's high, then the body controls it and it crashes to the ground. Then you crave something, so you eat something sweet again, and your blood sugar spikes high, and then it comes crashing to the ground. And it's very difficult to get off that roller coaster when you've got on it, when your body's started to go onto it. And when you're doing that, when you're in that peak and trough roller coaster, cortisol is used to manage it. So it's like that's a constant thing that's then triggering the release of cortisol, that's pushing it along. And that's really the biggest way in which specific types of food cause stress. Okay. If you have a particular sensitivity to a food, people have gluten sensitivities, they have dairy sensitivities, they might have an egg sensitivity. If you have that and you're continuing to eat those foods, that causes a stress as well. But we tend to know about that through other reasons first. But the main one is definitely these sugary, refined foods and that roller coaster that it puts us into.
I see. Wow. Okay. And so what sort of diet do you recommend in general? What are the foods that, help with these kind of symptoms? As a general rule of thumb, what would you go for?
Yeah. So I encourage people to eat a whole food diet, as unprocessed as possible.
Yeah.
So we're trying to keep your blood sugar nice and stable. So we want slow release carbohydrates. That means things like whole grains, brown rice, quinoa, whole grain bread, vegetables, whole vegetables, fresh fruits. It means having a protein source with each meal. So that could be egg, that could be cheese, that could be chicken, that could be beans, lentils, meat, but a small protein source with each meal. That helps your body to keep the blood sugar really nice and stable. And then good quality fats. So that's fats from olive oil, from avocado, from nuts, from seeds. That makes sure that the cells in your body have got the right essential fats to give them a good functioning membrane, the cell membrane. That's really important for making our stress response system more sensitive. And then thinking about when we eat. So trying to have regular meals, about 4 to 5 hours between each meal, and having a good overnight fast. So, you mentioned earlier having your dinner at 7 o'clock, and then, you can feel a little bit hungry later on. But actually, no, you're not hungry. You're tired. Exactly. Go to bed, sleep. Sleep is the best pill, the best cure for stress. But sleep and then fasting overnight. The fasting overnight is so important to make sure that the digestive system has had a chance to really process things, to have its kind of housekeeping clear out overnight. That's really important in getting the hormones, the metabolic hormones, that's like a symphony orchestra, allowing them to do their job and not be interfered with by more food dripping in. Mm-hmm. So getting that overnight fast of at least 12 hours. Really important for, as part of this whole way of eating. And I really encourage us to think about it as a way of eating rather than eat these foods, don't eat those foods.
Okay.
Nutrition is the whole plate rather than the individual foods. So important to think of it that way.
Yeah, that's very good to know. Yeah. What about drinking? So, shall we avoid coffee and alcohol when we're stressed? I mean, I think, coffee, I stick to 1 cup a day in the morning because I know that it triggers a bit of anxiety in me. It's really strange how it works. And I guess alcohol is the same because is that because they are both acidic drinks, or what would you recommend to,
Okay.
be drinking?
Okay. So honestly, the advice I give is to avoid using coffee and alcohol when stressed. And there's a deliberate emphasis on the word using,
Yeah.
because there is nothing inherently wrong in moderate enjoyment of coffee and alcohol. In fact, both have got amazing
Yeah,
benefits.
yeah, exactly.
Caffeine, there's antioxidants in the coffee bean. It can sharpen brain function. I mean, caffeine is one of the is really is the best brain enhancing, cognitive function enhancing substance we know about. Alcohol is fantastic for social cohesion, for celebration, for having fun. They're all crucial in having a healthy stress response system. Alcohol's also got resveratrol in it if we're drinking red wine. But what happens is that we can use coffee. And again, I'm deliberately emphasizing we use it to energize us when we are tired rather than eating in a way that sustains our energy or sleeping sufficiently. Sometimes we even use coffee to carry sugar to boost our energy. I was in Starbucks this morning and I was just looking with kind of fascination at how the calorie content of the drinks really racks up. And I'm sort of comparing different drinks. I'm comparing the turmeric latte with the regular latte and thinking, why is there 100 calorie difference in those? And then it dawns on me they've added sugar.
Mm.
They call it a turmeric latte. What they don't call it is a turmeric and sugar latte, but there must be more sugar added into it. So I think this is really important to realize. Just these things sound wonderful and they taste wonderful, but they're hidden carriers often of sugar, and sugar is the problem. So I think it's a real shame because we start to abuse coffee and alcohol, and that gives those things a really bad name. When in fact, if we're using them in a smarter way, they can be beneficial for our health. They can give us huge enjoyment, and everyone can be happy. So, really, when I'm working with clients, I very rarely encourage them to cut coffee or cut alcohol entirely, but I do work with them on how to manage it, how to handle it, how to use it in a more constructive, helpful way. Now, I will acknowledge that sometimes we develop addictions to these things.
Mm-hmm.
And in those cases, we do sometimes need to have a much more gradual withdrawal of it.
Yeah.
Rather than going from 5 coffees a day to zero, there will be an unpleasant withdrawal symptom if we do that overnight. Better to reduce it gradually,
Yeah.
and then go into a period of abstinence, a period when we avoid them entirely, just to really learn how to disengage from that addiction to the
Mm.
substance. So it is a bit of an individual thing. Some of us can take it or leave it. Some of us, it's a little bit all or nothing.
Yeah.
We have to take an individual approach to that.
So my next question is about how we can de-stress in general. So is there something that you do that you know about that you can tell us that we don't know about?
What's the trick? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know, that's such a fascinating question. I do think a lot of this comes back to education and awareness and understanding what stress is to us, and how it's impacting us. Because let's take you and I, for example, the same the same events, the same trigger happens to both of us, and I see it as horribly stressful. For you, it's a walk in the park. It really has, you don't bat an eyelid over it and handle it, easily in your stride. So again, it's recognizing that stress isn't the external thing. It's actually the internal response we have to it.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is why, I love your approach, which is to, not just have a nutrition program, but to have a movement side of it, to have the yoga involved, to have, come at it from a very integrated way. And that's crucial. I really encourage people to take quite a honest look at what is causing you stress in your life. Is it your thoughts to that thing? I mean, I have a friend at the moment who, she's always stressed. She sounds stressed. She's always complaining about what's difficult. And it's very difficult to talk about this when it's with a, very close, dear friend, but it's almost, she's always battling against the other thing. It's always their fault. It's her husband's fault. He hasn't done this. And I just wish I could take her aside and encourage her to turn it around and think, well, actually, maybe it's your reaction to these things. That's what you can change. That's what's in your control.
Yeah.
It's easy to say. It's a little bit harder to enact, to put into place. But fundamentally, that's what makes a difference for all of us. The way to process that is self-help books can help. Talking therapies can be really helpful, really beneficial. We need to get the foundations right in our lifestyle. That means getting enough sleep, good quality sleep, eating the whole food diet, finding habits that help us to relax, whether that's a bath, whether that's a yoga class, whether that's breathing exercises, meditation. What all of those things have in common is that they help us to listen to our body rather than to block it out and to mask what the body is telling us.
Yeah, exactly. And to go back to what you were saying about your friend, I think if you can, you tell her. Maybe you should. I know it's a hard thing to say, but I was a little bit like this in the past, and somebody told me, and it actually started to make me aware that I was a bit too stressed with what was going on in my life, and then I started to take steps towards better, more relaxed me. And now I know about the signs. I know what I should be doing. I know I need the ritual every day of doing yoga and meditation and having healthy food every day. So that's my own thing. But if I didn't have that person who actually told me, and it was hard to listen, I don't know if I would be, here today, a few years later, having that knowledge and knowing about it.
No, you're very true, and that reminds me of a situation I will never forget. This was long time ago. It was while I was studying nutrition. And there was a group of us who were all doing our clinical practice at the same time. We were in Ealing, and we would do these clinical practices where we would rotate. One of us would act as the patient, the other would act as the practitioner, and then someone would be observing. And as my peer was doing my case history, she started talking to me about stress. I'm not stressed. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm definitely not stressed. And it only dawned on me a little bit afterwards.
Yeah.
Just the lack of recognition I had as to the state of my maladaptive stress response at that time. And she was amazing in terms of just patiently listening to me and not trying to shame me into it, but almost allowing me to see my habits, holding a mirror up, and that trick of showing that to people, or waiting until they're ready to make changes, that they're ready to look at their life. That's an art, that rather than a science. I think that therapeutic relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. So we need to wrap up soon. I want to ask you one last thing about well-being in general and how we can improve our well-being. What would you give as a number one tip to do? And that is really easy to implement on a daily basis. I'm all about like easy, simple, quick.
Yeah. For me, it's as simple and as complex as finding what you love and doing it. And I think that genuinely is a really simple thing to do. I think sometimes we can overcomplicate our lives and ourselves. You talked earlier about that ritual, that routine that you have every day. I think that is absolutely crucial, and defending that time, protecting that time to the hill. If I don't look after myself, no one else is going to do it.
True.
If I don't look after myself, I'm not going to be the best nutrition practitioner that I can be. I love what I do. I'm passionate about what I do. I love the subject. I love sharing information about the subject. But I know I don't do that very well if I allow it to overwhelm me. And I've had two close to burnouts in my life. One was before I changed careers and started to study nutrition. But the second one was during that situation I just described, when I was finishing my studies and I was, starting to build up my nutrition practice. So really, it should have been such an exciting time of my life. I was doing the right thing. I'd found my calling and I was following it, but I was doing it in such almost like an aggressive way with myself. I wasn't giving myself time. I wasn't giving myself any downtime. I wasn't sleeping well. I wasn't exercising. I was very fixated on, I have to make this work. And that has been a huge lesson, that I need to make time for myself and protect that to the absolute hilt, because that's the thing that keeps me sane.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Angela.
You're very welcome. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. So for more of Angela's nutrition advice, visit her website at feedyourselfsmarter.com. Now we want to hear from you. If you have any questions or any guests that you recommend, send me an email. Thanks for listening and have a great day. Bye for now.